So it's a story of starting with citizen science and going far in citizen science. So thanks, Steve. Over to you.
Thanks, Les. What I've done is I've put together a slideshow. So I'm going to start off with this. So I'm just going to share my screen. Here we go. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm actually really more of an industrial chemist who works with polymers. I'm not a qualified polymer chemist or anything like that. And I often refer to myself as a bucket chemist rather than a test tube chemist. I work in factories rather than laboratories. But all my life I've been into butterflies, and what I want to do is take you a bit through the sort of life that I've had and the influences and how it fits in with where I am now, and maybe some lessons for the future as well of where we need to go as a community. So just looking at the beginnings, at the bottom there, I managed to find some old photographs of me when I was a little kid. And right next to that picture is, of course, Versa Dewey painted lady butterfly. I still remember the first one of those I ever saw in the backyard near my house. I nearly died. I ran inside to get the net, and when I came outside, it had gone. A little bit further up is me around about the age of probably 7 or 8 with my aunt's dog. We used to go tramping around the lanes of the south of England chasing butterflies like that red admiral. I used to go to places like that's White Sands Bay in South Wales, or into the Lake District. You can see there with my kiddie's net, which was basically a shrimping net. But if you look in the middle there, there's that dreadful looking mill, and that is a place called Heatbridge in the north of England, and that's where I come from. You can imagine why I love Africa so much. But funnily enough, even there, if you look here, there's a moth, a beautiful moth, Deliphylla alpinor, the elephant hawk moth. We used to find their larvae around about here and breed them through. And we used to get a lot of cabbage white butterflies like this one. And of course, even a small tortoiseshell, which is quite rare these days, to see one of those was a real treat. So that's where I started off from. And if you look at what the influences were, I mean, my dad for a start was very interested in silk moths. He was actually a textile engineer, and he used to use silk moths, but not boring little Bombyx mori, the white one. He used to use the big emperor moths, the atlas moths and that sort of thing, to teach his students about sericulture. One of my school teachers at primary school was a lepidopterist. He started a little butterfly club, moth club. But then in the UK, we were lucky in having very, very good TV programs. Of course, David Attenborough, Sir David Attenborough now, had a program called Zoo Quest, which I got into very much when I was a kid. Then there were lots of others, Animal Magic, Blue Peter, Zoo Time, and then there was one called Survival, which started off with an African fish eagle throwing its head back and yelping. And around about the time that was out, my best childhood friend went to live in Tanzania and started sending me packets of butterflies back from there and sort of lit a fire. In the background there, you can see that derelict mill, that derelict wool mill at Trimble in Haywood. And that's where my dad used to work. You can see some beautiful woods just outside there. When I lived there, the place was really badly polluted, but now it's absolutely beautiful. In the UK, they've greened up a lot of places that used to be really quite dead. So when I went to secondary school, Brewer Grammar School, I had some dreams. And to begin with, if you look at the bottom left, there's that beautiful sylvan scene, which you can see was a bit of broken machinery there. There's a place called Ashworth Valley, which was our local butterfly hunting haunt, and looking for birds and eating birds' nests and so on. So it's in the north of England. That wasn't far from that picture I showed you earlier. It was in the hills behind there. So we did have some nice places we could go. But then later on, I got into places like Broxbourne Woods, which is a beautiful place here, and then also the Norfolk Broads, and this is Hickling Broad, and that's actually the main place if you go to England, if you want to see the Papilio machon britannicus, the UK swallowtail, that's where those butterflies fly. And I went there as a little kid and caught one, and I was there the other year, and I actually saw quite a few of them flying around and then got some photographs. And then we have the large blue, Maculinea arion, which is very rare in the UK, and common blue, painted lady, black hair streak, all these wonderful things that I used to dream about seeing. But also when my friend Barry went to live in Dar es Salaam, he used to send me things like gold-banded foresters, Euphedra nifron, things like these purple tips and the narrow green-banded swallowtail, Philia nereus. And then I used to get bought books on butterflies, and in one of them there was this incredible thing called Hutchinson's high flyer, which I swore one day I'd see that, and luckily in South Africa I have. So again, I was lucky because I had a friend who came to live out here. I was encouraged by my parents and by the school teachers. I think it's very important that you get that kind of enthusiasm. The one thing that never occurred to me was that I could go to university and study this and become a professional. It was only ever presented as something you could do as an amateur. When I grew up, moved to the south of England, less pollution in the countryside. In the background there is actually a famous, that's Wicken Fen, and that's Lord Rothschild's shooting lodge there where he used to breed swallowtails and that sort of thing. And I lived not far from there. Joined ICI at Welwyn Garden City, trained as an industrial chemist. They also taught me a heck of a lot about photography and colour matching, and never used it. Typical ICI. I got mobile, got myself a car, travelled around, joined the local naturalist club. And of course, being ICI, multinational, there were always jobs coming up in other parts of the world. So it was only a matter of time, really, until I decided to get out to Africa, which is my first choice. And so the reality, here we are. I've lived in South Africa now since 1980. And here's just a few examples of some of the beautiful places we go here. You've got the grassland in the Drakensberg foothills here with the Euphrates Slovakia, the Table Mountain Beauty. This is a forest not far from here near Durban. And that's a mother of pearl butterfly, Protegomorpha parhassus, which again was a childhood dream of mine. When I was a little kid, I won a prize at school and went to the British Museum and got to have a look at behind the scenes at the butterfly collection. And all I wanted to see were Kaiseri hens and morphos and things. And the keeper said, no, forget all those big flashes, come and look at these. And he opened the drawer of Chryseritis, or Pieselmitis as they're called. That's this kind of butterfly here. I thought, where do those come from? They must come from Brazil looking like that. I said, no, South Africa. They're actually endemic to South Africa, and that's one of the most beautiful ones, the Adonis opal. We've, of course, got these beautiful Karoo areas here, and that butterfly doesn't fly in the Karoo, it flies in the forests. The classical African, that's a sunrise, actually, in the Kruger National Park. My favorite tree, this is the Burkett africana, the wild syringa in Lapalala. This is the butterfly you get there. It's another one of my childhood dream butterflies, the beautiful yellow saffron sapphire, Hylas pollini. This is Lekalamitsi Nature Reserve, one of our most biodiverse places. Beautiful spot. It's got everything from lowland forests, montane forests, high grasslands. You get these protea feeding Capes butterflies here. And this again is in the Drakensberg foothills, and there's me with my car, my beloved Subaru, and we're up on top of this mountain chasing rare butterflies and photographing them. So that's what I've been essentially doing for the last. I joined the Lepidopter Society in 1986. I got a job with a company car. It changed my mind. I changed my life. Sorry, I joined LepSoc. My wife was the one that was responsible for that because she entered me for a TV competition, which was rather like Mastermind, not realizing that I didn't know who LepSoc was, and they said, "Who's this cheeky pom who comes over here and pretends to be an expert on African butterflies?" And I didn't come last. I didn't win, but I got a phone call from one of the members, and I went along to the AGM, and that was it. So I said to my wife, "Don't moan about me going butterflying all the time, because it's all your fault." And LepSoc, we used to go and twitch anything that moved. We were known for driving crazy distances. I think the maddest thing we did was driving from Johannesburg to Zululand to twitch the mottled green nymphs. And on the way back, we heard by pager that there were Eliades simplex, the June copper, flying in numbers at Kuruman. So it was a 3,500 kilometer weekend. And for a long time, we were collecting, but I was also a keen photographer. I was a motor racing photographer for a while. And I met a couple of real influencers who I really started to concentrate on photography. And then one of them, John Johannes, said, "What's the point of taking pictures if you're just going to stick them in a slide tray and not do anything with them? You've got to publish." So anyway, not long after that, I got some very lucky breaks. It's actually not what you know, it's who you know. And here we have some influencers and mentors. You can see Les there at the top. This is Ivan Migdal, who wrote the first field guide to South African butterflies. He's sadly dead now. He's a Kenyan guy and a professional photographer. He taught me a heck of a lot. And over here we have John Joannou, and he was probably the biggest influence in me because he was a very kind gentleman, also sadly dead now. He was one of the founding members of LEPSOC Africa. We have here some ne'er-do-wells at the LEPSOC annual braai. That's me, obviously. Bill Steele, my oldest friend. We lived together in the UK. Well, I lived near him in the UK back in the 1970s. And Martin Lumberstead, Graham Henning, Chris Fick, Alf Curl. Mark Williams, who he's founder of the Lepidopterist Society of Africa. And Torben Larsen, of course, some of the West Africans might have heard of him because he wrote The Butterflies of West Africa. And I remember reading his books when I was a kid. I thought he was a lot older than he was. As it turned out, he was only about 5 years older than me. But he got around the world at a phenomenal rate. Steve Collins, who the Kenyans may know, he runs the African Butterfly Research Institute in Kenya. This is Alan Heath. He's a top expert on Lycaenidae here. He wrote The Butterflies of Zambia with a couple of other people. Clive Quickelberg, who used to be the Durban Municipal Museum curator. Graham Henning, that's Jeremy Dobson. He should have been here tonight, unfortunately. Dave Edge, who's currently LEPSOC's treasurer. This is Kevin Coburn, one of my oldest friends who lives down here in KZN, with the book that brought us all together, which is the SABCA book, the Butterfly Atlas. So where's it taken me? Well, first of all, LEPSOC did a little book called How to Study Butterflies and Moths in Africa. And I put my hand up and edited it. And it was all written in WordPerfect. There was no such thing as desktop publishing or WYSIWYG screens in those days. And that came out. We made 1,000 copies, and it sold well enough to give LEPSOC a real shot in the arm financially. Then, together with John Joannou and the Henning brothers, we did a very, very ambitious project called Living Butterflies of Southern Africa, which unfortunately didn't get past the first volume. It was really a bit ahead of its time, and it set out to have every life history of every Southern African butterfly in colour in a 5-volume set. Yeah, we weren't getting anywhere with it. We couldn't get enough funding to carry on with it. And then, funnily enough, Strake Publishing got hold of me, a guy called Simon van Noort, who runs the South African Museum's insect collection down in Cape Town. He was writing this little book called The Sasol First Field Guide to Butterflies and Moths. And what had happened, Ivan Migdol had got sick. We didn't realize how sick he was, unfortunately, and was basically uncontactable. And Pippa Parker, who turned out to be my editor, Simon said, look, get hold of Steve Woodhall. Him and John Joannou have got thousands of photographs. If you can't get hold of Ivar's photographs, you can get Steve to help you. And well, then the relationship developed between myself and Strake. We did the first edition of the field guide, and then we did a pocket guide, the latest edition that's just come out. And then, of course, while all this was going on, there's a certain lady called Silva Missinero who popped up, and I was talking to Les through one of my birding friends, Trevor Sneyman, way back years ago, because we had a problem in LEPSOC because the collectors were not really trusted that well by the authorities, and we wanted to get more involved in conservation rather than just stamp collecting, really. And the SABCA was really born out of that desire. We started out with a relationship with the Western Cape Nature Department, and then that grew. And then SABCA was the first citizen science project in Africa on butterflies. It started out with a complete, it was well funded. It started out with a complete audit and collection of every single butterfly collection in the world that had Southern African butterflies in it, including mine. I had a student come and live here for about 3 months, eating me out of house and home. And after all this work, we produced this atlas and red list. It was really a red data book. But what came out of it was the first start of LepiMap. I think the first virtual museum, if I stand to be corrected, was a reptile map. And then we came along a little bit later, and it just grew to the point where I think now we've got more virtual records than we do from the original collections. And it just showed us how powerful this thing was, especially when my first field guide came up. That's when digital photography took off. The first one was done entirely on slides. So I'm just checking on the time here, make sure I'm not talking for too long. Here we go, yeah. The first one came out, it was all photographed on transparencies. And then with the proceeds of that book, I went and bought myself a digital camera and set off to re-photograph everything I could on digital, which is what we've done now with the new book. And in doing that, of course, digital photographs are lovely. You can shrink them down to little JPEGs, you can put them onto the internet, and that is how the virtual museum got going. And what's happened since then, of course, is the concept of virtual museums has grown dramatically. And now we've got this wonderful project, the BDI. We've got people from as far afield as Liberia, Kenya, Somalia, you know, all over the continent, connecting up, finding ways of funding ourselves, finding ways of getting people excited about biodiversity, because biodiversity is under threat like it never has been before. It really, really is. And in Africa, of course, where a lot of the wild country here is still reasonably wild. It's not like Europe and the UK. I mean, you saw where I grew up, there was virtually no wild country left there at all. Here in Africa, we still do have some wild country. And the challenge is to actually protect that and make sure that we conserve the biodiversity. Finish off with a picture of one of my favorite places, which is Umfolozi Nature Reserve, about 300 k's up the road from where I live. During SABCA, we did a couple of fantastic butterfly surveys there, where we went and a whole bunch of us went in there, lived in the research camps and ran around with our own private rangers, walking around, dodging elephants and lions and things, and getting some brilliant butterfly photographs, some of which are in the new book. And that was also part of the SABCA project, because during the SABCA project, we had a relationship that built very well between ourselves and the nature conservation departments. They gave us permits to go anywhere we wanted. They organised overnight stays or weekend stays or even week stays for us. They themselves benefited a lot because they got a lot of information that they hadn't been able to get hold of before. So, you know, we did a lot of collaboration work with South Africa's conservation departments. And of course, behind all this was Les and Megan and Sylvia and the guys started off as the ADU and is now the BDI. And so now it's actually fantastic, you know, at the age of 62, to see all these young people on this platform, you know, looking at going into the way forward. And, you know, I had some fantastic influences when I was a kid in terms of books and television programs and so on. And it's really good, yeah. After all these years, I've become one of the influencers, I hope, and it's great. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.